Okay, well, thank you for coming to this cabinet meeting. First of all, just like to start with apologies for absence. First of all, Stephen Allen-Britus, the leader of the council, Councillor Stephen Allen-Britus, is not here. He's got some slight cold symptoms and has quite rightly followed the advice to stay away. And also, in order to respect the advice and the guidance, we're trying to keep attendance at meetings only to those where essential. And so we also have apologies from councillors Attawar, Braund, Cooper Marbia, Macaulay and Welton. So that's apologies. Item 2 is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations? Item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. Can they be agreed? They are agreed. What I'd like to do is to move item number. I think it's 13 to the front of the meeting, because the chief executive is here and needs to leave at 7:30 in order to get to an important call about the coronavirus response nationally. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to say the purpose of that item is clearly to ensure that the working of the council carries on during the coronavirus outbreak. But also, I think it's very important that we have an opportunity to reassure residents who might be tuning in, and to councillors who may see this, that whilst political meetings of the council will now be stopping for the duration of the outbreak, that decisions being made by the council will continue to involve members. And also to very much reassure people that whilst these meetings will not be taking place, the work of the council, if anything, is going to increase over the coming months. And there's an extraordinary amount of effort that's going in from all parts of the council that we very much appreciate. And it might be an opportunity to reassure residents about the scale of work that we're doing, and the kind of work that we're doing, and what that will mean for them locally. Is that all right? If Mr. Curran would like to speak on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, just to repeat that these arrangements are extraordinary because of the extraordinary circumstances that we're facing. And although we are technically delegating decision-making in many cases to officers, those officers will not be making those decisions on their own. They will be fully involving members and taking the views of members before the technical decision-making actually occurs. And it's also worth us noting that since these papers were published, the government has declared an intention to change the law so that future council meetings can take place virtually. At the point that that law is changed, we will ensure that that is used to its maximum ability so that members are able also to formally make the decisions as well as be party to them. So we'll wait to see that amendment coming through in the bill, and when it is published, we'll then take action in relation to it. We are responding to the challenges that the coronavirus has presented. Fortunately, we have had plans which we have exercised since the pandemic flu scares in the early 2000s, and indeed we have a pandemic flu plan dating back to 2009, which has been brought up to date for the current difficulties that we're facing and implemented. That means that there is a national strategy which also has a regional aspect to it, which means that things are coordinated at a London level, and indeed that's the reason why I have to leave at 7:30 to take part in one of those calls. We then have sub-regional arrangements and then borough-based arrangements too. So all of those systems are currently working effectively. We have daily telephone calls across that system to ensure that information is flowing in both directions. And so far, all of our services have been working extremely well, and all of those arrangements are functioning well too. That means that we've been able to maintain our services as well as responding to the challenges that exist at the moment. That is in large part to the credit of the staff that we have here in Merton, and I am both proud and humbled at the same time, if that's not too much of a paradox, by the quality of the response that we've had. Wherever possible, people are working from home, although we do have staff who have to have face-to-face engagement with the public, and that is happening on a day-to-day basis. It means that social care is preserved and that we're able to respond to the new challenges that arise. Members of the public who are listening in may well have heard the Prime Minister yesterday evening announce that an entirely new service providing a shielding arrangement for 1.5 million people is about to be launched. That's to help those people who are the most vulnerable, who may, if they caught the virus, be most at risk. And the Council is part of the plans to assist those people. So by the end of the week, we will have established a shielding system which allows us to ensure that anybody who is forced to stay in their home for the next 3 months will be receiving food and social support and medicines, and the Council has a system already set up ready to try and assist them. So there's a very wide range of activity taking place, but so far all of that is functioning well. That doesn't mean that there won't be challenges in future. The best of systems is vulnerable to the individuals who have to deliver those systems themselves falling ill. That is unpredictable by its very nature, but is likely to happen at some point over the coming weeks. We do have plans and programs to try and be as resilient as possible, but I can't guarantee that they won't from time to time cause a little bit of disruption in the system as and when that happens. But as far as we can plan for the system and the virus, we have done, and the systems and plans that were in place do seem to be currently working reasonably effectively.
Okay, thank you for that, and I obviously understand that you need to leave very, very shortly, if not now, actually. So thank you very much for your contributions. I don't know whether either would Councillor Byers like to say something about the work that's going on under his direction.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, first of all, my thanks to all of the staff in the community and housing team who have responded fantastically and in a very short period of time developed the work that the Chief Executive spoke about. I'd also like to thank all of those in the voluntary sector who have also mobilised incredibly quickly to put support networks in place, and that will now be coordinated through MVSC, but a lot of our voluntary organisations are contributing to that. And it's right too that I thank all of those in the community who have offered their support through the mutual aid networks that have sprung up across the borough. It really is a fantastic response that we've seen not just in Merton but across the country. We've been working very closely with our care providers to ensure that all of those currently in receipt of social care, whether that's domiciliary care or residential care, are still receiving that service, and at the moment we do have good capacity in both of those services. As the Chief Executive said, that is likely to change at some point, but there is work going on across London to ensure that boroughs support one another where there are problems with capacity. We've also looked at our own services, so we provide a number of daycare services, and last week we decided to temporarily close 2 of those, one for older people and one for those with learning disabilities, albeit that will be run from a separate day centre. But those were important decisions to ensure the safety of all our users is paramount at this time. We're currently working, as the Chief Executive said, on the hub model that the government is rolling out to shield those 1.5 million residents that have been identified as the most vulnerable, and I know our officers are well underway in the planning for that and have been doing so for the past week or so. So I just want to reiterate really my thanks to all the officers, particularly those in the department that I look after in community and housing, who really have responded fantastically to this. And thank to those in the voluntary sector and volunteers from the community. It really is a team effort here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Councillor Stringer, would you like to talk about the areas that are under you?
Yes, please. And it does feel very odd to know this might be the last time that we're meeting face-to-face for a while. And just to reiterate, as you said, that isn't because any work is stopping. There's going to be a lot going on. I've been awestruck by the focus and commitment and the sheer hard work of so many groups of people over the past couple of weeks. So firstly, the offices, as Tobin says, my department and the other departments that I've been interacting with, from the most junior to the most senior levels, have all been completely committed to making sure that the key services keep going, whilst also pivoting towards doing what we can to protect our residents from coronavirus and its impacts. Head teachers and school staff have been outstanding. So all mainstream schools were still open today to small numbers of children and young people that needed care. And I'd like to thank parents and families as well for fully understanding the changed role that schools are playing at the moment. Other councillors from across the political spectrum have been very dedicated to working to support their residents. And Tobin also mentioned the mutual aid groups who have been quick to get supporting their neighbours and the vulnerable in our community. And also to those who've been donating to support the charitable efforts and the charities working in our borough in this difficult time. Yes, so quickly on my services, so mainstream schools were open small numbers today, and that's continuing to be monitored, and we're making sure that those who do need looking after there are there. Children's safeguarding is being protected. Some other services are having to shift, and some more will be shifting over the coming weeks. For example, some youth groups and youth provision is shifting to online, and that can be done over for short periods of time without too much negative impact. But things will change, and we do need people to realise what a challenging situation this is. But just to thank everybody for their efforts so far, and just continue to follow all the public health advice as best as we can, please.
No, thank you. And I mean, I'd like to say I should have stressed at the beginning of the meeting that whilst we're operating at the minimum numbers at this meeting, we've been talking to colleagues across the council and to other councillors and other members of the cabinet. And I think that one of the things that's really come across has been what an extraordinary effort in an incredibly short amount of time is being put in by some extraordinary people who work in Merton for the council or who live in Merton as our residents. It brings a lump to your throat to think about how great a place we live in, and what an honour it is to see that work taking place up close. The chief executive talked about being proud and humbled, and I think that's really how many of us are feeling at this time. And since there may be residents and councillors who know that this meeting's taking place and want to just drop in and make sure that we're doing full justice to it, it is also fair to say that, as the Chief Executive said, there are going to be challenges and there are going to be stresses put on the council and the services, but also on households across the borough. It's going to be a real test of families and communities across the borough, but we know that everybody is up for it. We ask for everybody to pay attention to the guidance that the health officials and the government are stressing at the moment, and we will see each other on the other side of this and be back to normal at some point in the future, we very much hope. From the areas under my control, I just want to give some reassurance to the public and to members as well that the financial assistance that is being provided will be passed on, that we will be ensuring that there are opportunities for those in hardship to, for instance, get council tax support and other financial assistance. We'll also be providing the appropriate assistance financially for groups like the food banks and MBSC. And it's very important work that they're doing in the community. And if that's it, I think that we should... Councillor Byers, do you want to say just a couple more words?
Chair, just struck me that I should, I think, specifically thank Dr. Dagmar Zuna, our Director of Public Health, who really is the linchpin behind a lot of this work and is having to work across all departments to interpret the advice coming down from Public Health England and advise colleagues from across the council. And she is working incredibly hard, supported by a very able team, but they are really working incredible hours at the moment, and I think it's right that we note our thanks to them.
Absolutely right, and it would be worth noting how so many people at the council have really shone during this whole episode, and we thank them for their efforts from the bottom of our hearts. Should we move to the recommendations? There are two recommendations. Recommendations A and B. They're approved. Approved. Thank you. So we'll return to the order of the council agenda, of the cabinet agenda. The next item is item 4. That's the reference from Sustainable Communities Scrutiny Panel, emission-based charging and review of the diesel levy. And I think it probably makes sense to take discussion at the same time of item 5. Considerations of emission-based charging and the future of the diesel levy. I'd like to thank the lead members and lead officers. Councillor Byers is here. Chris Lee, the director, is also here. Councillor Byers, would you like to say anything about these?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I start by thanking the Sustainable Communities Scrutiny Panel? It was a very good discussion, I thought, we had a few weeks ago on a very comprehensive paper. I'd also like to thank all of the officers who had any involvement in this, particularly Ben Stevens and Kath James, but also colleagues from Public Health who were involved, and from the air quality team. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Martin Welton, who has the portfolio responsibility for the parking element and who has done a lot of work on this. It's a very comprehensive paper and it deals with a few things. It looks first at the impact that the diesel levy has had since its implementation a few years ago. And whilst it's ultimately difficult to categorically see the impact because the number of CPZs we've had in that period has increased, so it's quite difficult to get a like-for-like number of permits in that period, there is evidence that the diesel levy has had some impact, and particularly there is qualitative evidence at Appendix 4 where officers asked those who traded in their diesel permits why they'd done so, and there is some anecdotal evidence that the diesel levy had some impact on that. The paper also sets out a comprehensive structure for an emissions-based approach to charging. And what's currently proposed is to use both the government's vehicle excise duty bandings and also the Mayor of London's ULEZ model. And the proposal is to use the vehicle excise duty to create the base rate, and then to use the ULEZ to replace what's currently the diesel levy. And the reason that we are proposing that is because they are ultimately tackling different pollutants. So the vehicle excise duty is tackling CO2 emissions, whereas the ULEZ is tackling NOx emissions. And we believe it's right that the model that we put forward tackles both pollutants. Replacing the diesel levy with the ULEZ also addresses one of the concerns that residents have had about the disparity that has existed between the diesel levy and the Mayor's ULEZ, which of course post-dates it, but which meant that you could potentially drive into London without paying, but still pay the diesel levy in Merton, and this would address that because it would use the ULEZ for that. We're also proposing to retain the PTAL structure that we adopted last year, but that officially came into force at the beginning of this year. And again, we think that's right because it's, in our view, complementary, as it seeks to address a slightly different policy objective, namely shifting people's behaviour towards more active and sustainable travel. And the structure set out in the papers proposes a model that uses PTAL plus those two forms of emissions-based charging. The paper asks for approval for a consultation process which is set out at section 12 and to delegate the final authority for that consultation to the Director and Councillor Welton as the Cabinet member, and I'm very happy to commend this paper to colleagues and ask that you support it. Thank you.
Councillor Stringer, did you want to speak on that? I should just add that the other members of Cabinet have obviously been consulted about this in advance. They were very impressed by the thoroughness of the report. Should also say that very grateful to the work of the scrutiny panel, Sustainable Communities Scrutiny Panel, for the work that they've put in on this matter. It's very interesting, the evidence that the levy so far has led to a reduction in the number of people with diesel cars in the affected areas. That's very interesting. The justification for continuing with the PTAL method is very helpful. If there's nothing else, I'll move to the recommendations. So on agenda item number 4, there's one recommendation that Cabinet take into account the reference of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel as set out in paragraphs 214 to 217 when making decisions on diesel levy and emissions-based charging proposals. Is that recommendation approved? Agreed. And then on agenda item 5, there are 5 recommendations, essentially to agreeing to move to a formal consultation process and with a raft of other measures to improve air quality in the borough. Are those 5 recommendations agreed? Agreed. Okay. So now we move to agenda item 6, a draft response to improving healthcare together, the consultation on that. And again, the lead member is Tobin Byers.
Thank you, Chair. Before I introduce the paper, I think it's right that we note our thanks to all of those who work in our health services at what is an incredibly difficult time. We really are grateful for all of their work in whatever capacity they are involved. The Improving Healthcare Together consultation, as colleagues will know, it is looking at a potential reconfiguration of services at the Epsom and St Helier Trust. The consultation is currently due to close on the 1st of April. I know that there has been a request that the NHS consider extending it in light of the coronavirus. I've not seen a response on that yet. So at present, it is due to close on the 1st of April, but it has been running for a significant period of time already, and I know that they have undertaken a lot of events. The Council is drafting a response, but that response will not be ready until shortly prior to the deadline. So this paper provides colleagues with an overview of the key lines of inquiry of that response and asks colleagues to note it and note that the final response will be agreed between the Director of Community and Housing and myself. The Council's been heavily involved in the IHT programme dating back some 3 years now, where Epsom and St Helier Trust first consulted on its own proposals before the clinical commissioning groups then took that up. And this paper sets out some of the work that has taken place over those 3 years, some of the dialogue and engagement that myself, the leader, and our officers have been involved in. And that work is still ongoing, so our public health team are continuing to work with Professor Andrew George, who's the chair of the Integrated Impact Assessment, and Mott MacDonald, the NHS's consultants, there is still work ongoing looking specifically at the deprivation and some of the impacts that we believe it would have. The Council has a very long-standing position on St Helier, and that has always been to support the retention of St Helier and the retention of its full suite of services. And the report does note the previous motions that Council has debated and agreed on page 110 at the top there. So in February 2017, Council passed a motion which noted its absolute opposition to any closure or downgrading of St Helier Hospital. And more recently, on the 5th of February this year, Council passed a motion supporting the government's proposed investment, as long as that includes the retention of accident and emergency, maternity and all existing services at St Helier Hospital. And this consultation response is in line with that position. The Council's concern broadly falls into two categories. The first is the impact on the deprived communities that access St Helier Hospital and are incredibly reliant on it. And we know that the wards around St Helier on the Merton side are incredibly deprived, as they are on the Sutton side, compared to both Belmont, where the new proposed hospital is, and Epsom, where the Trust has its other site. In order to ensure that we were able to fully respond to this consultation, the Council commissioned Roger Steer, who is an ex-Trust Finance Director and Chief Executive with a lot of experience working in the health sector, but more recently supporting local authorities in engaging with proposals around acute reconfiguration, and indeed he's worked with both Merton and Sutton on previous consultations around reconfiguration at Epsom St Helier, so is aware of the area. Paragraph 216 and the sub-paragraphs after that set out the key lines of inquiry that the consultation will focus on. And I know colleagues have all had an opportunity to look at those, and we have had a discussion on this previously. In addition to a response being submitted by the executive, this will go through a scrutiny process. Now, unfortunately, there had been a meeting planned of Merton's Health Scrutiny Committee this Wednesday. Clearly, that's had to be cancelled in light of the coronavirus. But I will be working closely with Councillor Peter McCabe, who is our representative on the Joint Health Scrutiny Committee, and there is a requirement that we submit this through that. I'm not aware at present of when their next meeting is, but whenever that is, Councillor McCabe and I will work closely to ensure our response is debated there. And just finally to note that the final response, once agreed between the Director and myself, will be made publicly available.
Would anyone else like to say anything?
Only to thank Councillor Byers and all the colleagues for their work in making sure that the needs and views of Merton residents are taken into account as part of this service redesign. It's been a tremendous piece of work. Thank you.
It's been very impressive to note the involvement and the interest of residents. It's obviously something that's very close to them. We should clearly stress the support that we all have for the National Health Service, particularly at this time when it's being put under very significant strain, and the workers in the NHS are doing such a magnificent job. Obviously, the process that we're talking about now may be affected by the consequences of the coronavirus outbreak, but nevertheless, we do have a long-standing position as a council, and there have been, as Councillor Byers has noted, very many council motions that have agreed this over some time. We've particularly showed concern about the impact of any decision on the most deprived communities of our borough, many of which are very close to St Helier Hospital. So on that basis, are we happy to agree the three recommendations here, which mainly are to note the key lines of inquiry that the Council is going to propose in its response, and to make sure that we respond appropriately to this consultation. Can we agree those recommendations? Thank you. That's agreed. So next is item 7, which is the draft community plan. Draft Merton Community Plan. The lead members on that is Councillor Stephen Allen-Britis, who, as I said, is not here, and the lead officer is Rachel Wardell, the Director of Children's Schools and Families, who again is not here. But in my function, chairing this meeting, I'd just like to thank everybody who's been involved in drawing up the community plan. It's a regular exercise conducted by the partnership to help draw out the community's priorities. This one covers the years 2020 to 26, and the development of the plan has been led by Police Chief Superintendent Sally Benatar on behalf of Merton Partnership, with the support of the Director of Children's Schools and Families here and the Council's Policy, Strategy and Partnership team. Pleased to note that the overarching goal of the community plan is to increase social capital in Merton as a driver to improve resilience and well-being, and with a focus on those parts of the borough with the lowest socio-economic outcomes. The community plan has 8 thematic priorities, and these priorities are based on strong evidence and engagement with the community. Delivery will be via the thematic networks, and oversight will be provided by the Merton Partnership Executive Board. And this community plan will be reviewed annually by Merton Partnership, with an annual report of progress to be published. So with all of that said and noted, does anybody have anything that they'd like to add? Councillor Byers?
Chair, just to commend the report and also the objectives. I chair the Health and Wellbeing Board, and really encouraged by some of the work that we see that's taken place over the past few years, and excited about the work that's coming up. And similarly, with the measures around climate change, we are very far advanced now in our climate emergency plan, and hope to present that at a cabinet, virtual or otherwise, in very due course.
Very good, and I know that the community plan actually covers the portfolios of most of the cabinet members, and many of them have been part of it, and it's been overseen by Councillor Lakshmi Attawar, who I know has been doing an excellent job, and I'd like to thank her for her work on this as well. So with that said, can we move to the recommendations? A and B, are they approved? Agreed? Agreed. So now, if we can move to item 8 on the Rains Park Sports Ground, and item 9, I think it makes sense to discuss those both together and then make decisions separately. On Sir Joseph Hood Memorial Playing Field, that's item 9. I think it's worth stressing that there have been some additional representations that have been received from ward councillors in West Barnes and from the Friends of Joseph Hood. So I just want to stress that we have received those, and we have included them in our considerations. And the considerations have been involved other members of Cabinet as well, who we've discussed the issues with. We believe that the issues that have been raised just now by the councillors and by the Friends of Group, we have dealt with those issues in the course of the consultation. We've consulted in an appropriate fashion, and we feel that the issues that they raise have been covered by the contents of the report in any case. I think it's very important to note that planning permission for both items has actually already been granted, and the phone companies who wish to use the facilities can actually do have powers to go to court to enforce those if necessary. Phone companies, it should be noted, do have very extraordinary powers that have been given to them under the Communications Act, and so if they have identified a need for masts in particular places, they have very strong powers to exert those in any case, irrespective of the views of people in the area, and so they can take those powers. There's also a community need for phone signal, and actually at the moment, with many people working at home or working close to home and needing phone signal close to home, that need for phone signal throughout the community is likely to increase, and the beneficiaries of these installations are likely to be people who live in the local area. As I said, the phone companies have powers to place masts where needed, and we have ensured, though, that through the planning process that the installations are not placed in a way that will interfere with the enjoyment of either of the open spaces. We should also say that the up-to-date reputable scientific evidence is there, and according to Public Health England, there's no evidence of harm. So with all of those things taken into account, I'd just like to check with the director who's here to see whether those are correct, and to see if he'd like to make any further points about this item. Chris Lee.
Chair, that is absolutely correct. The only other points I would add are that we've followed our standard procedure for the advertising and the consultation on the lease, and that both of these sites are affected by a covenant. We don't believe there are any residents who enjoy the benefits of that covenant, but we are working with the operator to secure an indemnity in the event of any challenge. So we don't think there's any impediment to following the recommendations set out in this paper.
Would anyone else like to add anything? If not, I will move, I think, to the recommendations. So, first of all, on the item 8, Rains Park, the recommendations are to consider the objections that have been raised in response to the Council's advertisement of the intention to grant a lease at Rains Park Sports Ground, and to authorise the Director of Environment and Regeneration to authorise completion of the lease on the main terms identified within the confidential Appendix 4 to this report under his delegated authority. Are those agreed? That's agreed. And then item 9, I do apologise if I'm reading virtually the same thing, but item 9 is also to consider objections, the recommendations, are to consider objections raised in response to the Council's advertisement of its intention to grant a lease at Sir Joseph Hood Memorial Playing Field, and to authorise the Director of Environment and Regeneration to authorise completion of the lease on the main terms identified within the confidential appendix to this report under his delegated authority. Is that agreed? They are agreed. Apologies. Thank you. So we'll move now to agenda item 10, which is the extension of the school cleaning contract, and the lead member on that is Councillor Eleanor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. This is would normally be a relatively straightforward extension, made slightly more pressing given the situation we find ourselves in with regards to the pandemic. So Julius Rutherford had been the cleaner for 26 of our schools for the past 3 years, and there had always been an option to extend. And following the feedback that we got from the schools, our proposal is that we do indeed extend for a further 2 years. And that decision, this paper was made before the activities of the past few weeks, but they have been very responsive and on top of the hygiene issues that we've needed them to be during that time. So we'd like to thank them for their support in supporting the health of Merton residents and children and teaching staff and other staff during that time. But I have no objections and I want to extend this contract, please.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. And unless Councillor Byers wishes to add anything, I'd like to extend the thanks of the whole of Cabinet to her and to officers, Rachel Wardell, the Director of Children's Schools and Families, and all of her officers who've been involved in this. And on the basis of this report, we're asked to approve the recommendation A to extend the existing contract with Julius Rutherford and Co. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, so we move to item 11, the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge Feedback Report and next steps. Obviously, the Council's aim is to improve and therefore we have invited a group of senior officers and members through the LGA to conduct a peer review of the Council and to look at what we might be able to do to improve in future years. And I'd like to thank everybody from the LGA who's involved in coming here and providing this review and offering their advice and their views. I think all of us who were involved in it found it extremely helpful and extremely interesting. I'd like to thank all of the staff and members of the council, the councillors here, who also took part in that review and were interviewed by the LGA Peer Challenge. I think that it's come up with a really interesting report. Just to go through some of the findings, I think it's worth noting that overall that they found that the council is well led and run and has a solid base, that there's strong leadership, and through that we've managed a difficult financial situation well and been able to maintain and improve outcomes for the residents of Merton. They've noted that our services are improving and delivering outcomes for residents despite very challenging circumstances, that we have a staff that is very knowledgeable and committed, and that there is a palpable sense of ambition amongst staff. They've also told us that they think that the council is a well-regarded partner locally and regionally, and that we're respected and trusted to lead. They note that the quality of officer-member relationship is very good and mature, and working relationships between politicians who work in the best interests of the borough. They point out that the council is self-aware, understands the challenges that we face as a community, and the peer team agreed with the issues and recommendations arising from our own internal review and emphasised the need to address those quickly. They did note a number of areas where they've come up with some positive suggestions for improvement as well. I think it's worth us noting that in the meeting tonight. For instance, they suggested that we should develop a clear and well understood narrative for Merton that describes our ambition, the ambition that we actually have for our people and for place. They've suggested that internal and external communications might be improved in order to help us talk to residents about some of our achievements. They've suggested some work that we can do around our approach towards risk, and have also noted the way that we support some of our elected members and work that we can do there. I think all of those suggestions are very, very helpful, and when times are a little bit more back to normal, we'll certainly want to take those on board. So that's me presenting the report. Do either of you have anything that you would like to add? No? Okay, so we'll move back to the recommendations. So recommendations 1 and 2, to note the findings and recommendations of the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge, and to approve the approach for implementing the recommendations as set out in the report. Are they both agreed? Very good, they're agreed. Which brings us to item 12, financial monitoring report. That again is a report that I'm presenting. It's part of our normal working operations, part of our business-like approach, bringing regular financial reports of how the council's doing on a month-by-month basis to Cabinet. This provides the data for the 10th month of the year, 1920, and it suggests that we're currently forecasting a variance in our budget of just 0.5%. It's a positive variance, so that's potentially an additional £2.6 million that would be available for the council in future years. I don't know if anybody has any comments that they would like to make, in which case we'll move to the recommendations A, B, C and D. Are they agreed? Agreed. So that just before we come to the end of the meeting, I'd just like to wish everybody well, all of us here and everybody beyond in the borough. Follow the advice and the guidance being given by Public Health England. Stay safe, and we'll come out of this as a strong community, which I know we've come into it as well. Good luck to everyone. Good night.